This video is sponsored by Squarespace. We're finally here. The 2022 season is over, finished. So it's time to reflect and look back on how things went. I'm talking specifically qualifying. I wanted to analyse a bit deeper into the qualifying gaps throughout the course of the season, try and pull what stories and understanding I can from that information, and then I'll put a tier list together at the end of the video. So we'll start at the back and work our way forwards, kicking off with Williams. Now, as you can see, I've broken down qualifying between the first 11 and last 11 races because I think it's important to add that additional context. Alex beat Nicky 9-1 out of the first 11, but Tommo, that doesn't add up to 11. True. Going through all the data, I've done my best to remove any anomalies. So any qualifying sessions where, a driver missed out, it is a clear one. But then also sessions where maybe one driver had a technical problem that meant they couldn't set as quick a lap as they wanted to. Just to do my best to make sure that all the representative times are fair. Round 4, Emilia-Romagna, Alex Albon's rear brake exploded, so he couldn't set a representative lap time. Therefore, that whole qualifying session is removed, so there's only 10 of 11 at the start. You see what I mean? First 11 races, a 0.726 gap. Huge, substantial. One dub for Nicky, though, fair play. He did out-qualify Alex at Silverstone. In fact, he got to Q3. But then of the final 11, that gap does come down to 0.524. However, it's 10-0 to Alex. I like keeping a close eye on qualifying. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that after every single qualifying session, I will update the head-to-head graphic. But head-to-heads, for sure, do not tell the full story. So now we go to the tier list. Look, I'm afraid, Nicholas Latifi, you've got to go straight into slow. Of course, I'm sorry, mate. Consistently out-qualified by George Russell as well. You could argue they're high-caliber teammates, but it's not good enough, mate. And then for Alex is an interesting one. Yes, he's wiped the floor with Latifi, but again, Latifi hasn't set the highest standard. The overall average gap, 0.625, is the biggest in the field. So I think based off that and the fact that I'm probably a bit biased, which is fine, I'm allowed, I'm going to put Alex in rapid. First season in that team as well, after a year off. I think that context as well is important. Next team, we have AlphaTauri. Now, I do have to explain one more thing with the way I've kind of worked this out. I've only taken the qualifying times from the best session that both drivers got to. For example, if both Pierre and Yuki got to Q2, then I'll take their Q2 times. If only one of them got to Q2, then I'll take both of their Q1 times. That way, I'm just comparing the times set in the most similar conditions to try and make this as fair as possible. So, in the first 11 races of the season, the gap, Pierre Gasly, 0.366 ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, but 3 qualifying dubs for Yuki, so fair play. Again, only 10. Ignoring round 2 in Saudi Arabia because Yuki didn't even set a time. However, for the last 11, interesting that gap comes down to 0.243, but Yuki actually gets 6 head-to-head wins over Pierre. I've kept the head-to-heads in here as well because there is context to qualifying your teammate. Say, for example, you're always out-qualified by 1/10 of a second. Your teammate does you over 22-0. Yes, from a mentality point of view, they'll have the upper hand and you'll be fuming, but there isn't much of a gap in terms of talent and ability. Having a high quality end product might indicate that you've got loads of qualifications. You've qualified for that position. Well, with today's video sponsor Squarespace, you don't need any web design qualifications. You don't need any graphic design, Photoshop knowledge. No, they have thousands of drag and drop, beautiful, award winning as well, templates at your fingertips to build your very own beautiful, personalized online home, otherwise known as a website. You might not think to treat yourself to a new website this Christmas, but I'm here to tell you you should. You can try Squarespace out completely free of charge, no risk. It's only when you want to put that finished website live to the world that you have to pay anything, and when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off your first website or domain. Back to the tier list. Okay, Yuki Tsunoda. Where am I going to put Yuki? He's definitely made a step forward from last year. I don't know, actually, because that AlphaTauri's taken a step back. You know what? I'm going to put him in solid for now, but I might come back and change this. As for Pierre Gasly, because of the experience he's got relative to Yuki, I can't put him higher, but I will also put him maybe in solid. I'm thinking even maybe mid for Gasly. I know he's out-qualified Yuki, but I am applying all that additional context of experience, momentum from the season before. Yuki's definitely taken a step forward this year in terms of qualifying pace, and I think Pierre's taken a bit of a step back, to be honest. Okay, time for Haas. This is an interesting one, actually. So, Kevin Magnussen, Mick Schumacher, first 11 races, 9-2 to Kev, 0.434 seconds. So, Kev reasonably clear of Mick. And I think that was apparent in the kind of first half of the season, that there was clearly advantage Kevin Magnussen. In the last 11, that head-to-head, so it's 7-4 to K-Mag, the gap comes down, but I actually thought the gap would be smaller than 0.3. 0.309 is still a reasonable gap between teammates. However, what I will say is for Brazil, where K-Mag put it on pole, in Q1, because Mick didn't get out of Q1, Kev went 2.407 seconds quicker than Mick Schumacher. Now, you could argue that's an anomaly, but at the end of the day, Mick actually had the correct compound of tyre on his car before Kevin did. But if I do get rid of that big time delta, this last 11 gap comes down to 0.1 of a second, basically. But I do have to leave that in there. It's not like Mick had a technical issue. He just didn't have the confidence underneath him to extract that lap time, and Kevin did, and Kevin deserves to be awarded for that. Okay, tier list. Mick Schumacher, I mean, it's mid, because he did get a few dubs over Kevin Magnussen. Have to give credit for that. As for Kevin, he's got a lot of experience. This was very impressive how he jumped into the car like super late on. There were times that he put that Haas right up at the sharp end. Losing his front wing end plate so many times didn't help, but he did the job in qualifying to get to Q3 a number of times. It's hard to not conflate with the racing performances, just trying to focus on quality. Aston Martin, now this one is very interesting. So first 11, it's a 0.5 gap. Vettel ahead of Stroll, 5-3 head-to-head. Much of that gap is because Seb dunked like 2 seconds on Lance in Baku. I was considering taking this one out because there were yellow flags at the end. That's when Alonso went straight on by accident. Yeah, we all see your game, Fernando. But also Stroll locked up and then he binned it into the wall and took out the front of his car. So that's on him. I can't chalk this one off, mate. It's half a second. However, in the second half of the season, look at that. Stroll actually out-qualifies Seb by 6 thousandths of a second. Again, I'm just talking about head-to-head sessions, the furthest they both were able to get in each qualifying session, although Seb takes the head-to-head. But very, very close qualifying pace, pretty much identical in the second half of the year. So, to be honest, I think I'm going to put Stroll mid, because yes, he's against a driver of the calibre of Sebastian Vettel, but he's been in that team for a long time, he's been in the sport for a long time. I can't not put high expectations on Lance, and I don't think he's ultimately delivering in qualifying enough. He's definitely improved. And then Vettel, you know what? I think Vettel saves it and gets into solid because he had a couple of really good qualifying performances towards the end of the year. Obviously, Q3 in Abu Dhabi is very fresh in the memory, so maybe there's a bit of recency bias there. Maybe it's harsh on Stroll. Maybe it's not. Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure you are. If you're already upset about how I've rated your driver, I'm sure you've let me know already. Alfa Romeo. Okay. This is interesting. This is very interesting, actually. Right, first 11 races, 7-3 head-to-head, a gap of 0.3 seconds, which on its own for a rookie coming in, Zhou Guanyu, behind someone who qualifies as well as Valtteri typically does, a man who could out-qualify and outpace Lewis on his day. Very impressive. And then look at that last 11. Yeah, 7-4 to Valtteri, but less than a tenth of a second between them. I mean, I think straight away, get the tier list out. I've got to put Joe in rapid. Given the context that it is his rookie season, which I think does need to be considered in this, to be as close to Valtteri Bottas as he has been in qualifying, incredibly impressive. Look, you could be like, oh, no, Valtteri's not very quick. It depends how you rate Valtteri, which is a lot of this, right? You're rating drivers relative to their teammates, and it depends just as much how you rate the driver you're talking about as it is how much you rate their teammate. So yeah, I'm putting Joe in rapid, and then Bottas I'm going to also put in solid. Yes, he did out-qualify Joe, but Joe's a rookie. Valtteri's been about for time. He was at Mercedes. Of course, he should be beating the rookie coming in. I'm just thinking about Pierre Gasly now. I think I'm actually going to move him down to mid. The expectations he set last year were just so high, and he just really hasn't delivered in qualifying like he did. On to McLaren. First 11, 9-2 to Lando Norris. Half a second the gap. Last 11, it came down to 0.374. A couple of dubs for Daniel in the first half. The only big anomaly time between the two of them was a 2.5 second gap in Q2 at Silverstone. If I do get rid of that one, then the gap comes down to 0.3 of a second in that first 11. However, I've got no good reason to get rid of that Silverstone result. Lando was just much quicker in that qualifying session and got out a lot more pace. And again, like Kevin Magnussen earlier, deserves to be credited for it. So obviously, look, Daniel has to go in slow, given the calibre of the driver that McLaren were expecting and what Daniel expects of himself to be that far off Lando, which again isn't a crazy number if you're a rookie jumping in. But for a driver of Daniel's experience, the fact that he's been qualifying so low has hindered his ability to use a race pace that I think he's got. Because in the race, you're not driving the car at 100%. Rarely are you driving the car at 100%. That's where that ultimate confidence Lando clearly has relative to Daniel. But in a race when you're typically driving at 80, 90%, like Daniel can sit in that window and get good performance out of that car and get some good race results. But as much as it's been bad for Daniel, I mean, Lando Norris, we have to put him in Quali God for now. Maybe I'll change that. Maybe I'll just want one driver in Quali God. I don't know. Whitewashed his teammate is 20-2 overall. Insane numbers. And again, when you combine that quali gap between the two with the fact that McLaren car is usually capable of just about getting into Q3, that 0.345 second delta is enough to dunk Daniel out in Q2 but get Lando into Q3, and that's where the problem lies. Time for Alpine now. First 11 races, 5-3, which means I've taken away 3 different qualifyings from the first 11. We had Esteban with a couple of technical issues. I decided to disregard those. But in those 8, the gap, 0.3 seconds, which is actually more than I thought it would be. Like last season, it was very close in quali and race. But I think this year in both quali and race, Fernando took a step forward relative to Esteban, which I don't know how much of that is concerning to Alpine versus Fernando just being a freak of nature and just being insanely good. And seeing the second half of the season, the last 11, where that gap closed up to 0.161 seconds. Once you're getting into the 0.1 territory, it becomes kind of insignificant, that gap. You can have a bad day, you can have a good day. So Esteban, at least a solid. Alonso, at least a rapid. Yeah, you know what, Alonso goes rapid. It's that first half of the season that's kind of let Esteban down a bit. I think that's why I'm going to keep him in solid. But Fernando for sure. Rapid, 100%. Mercedes. Look at these gaps. First 11 races, 0.063 seconds. Last 11, I had to add an extra decimal place because it's 0.0006. That's crazy. Yes, it's 7-3 head-to-head Lewis, but again, it's that average gap that I think tells more of the story. It's difficult, right? Because it's George's first season at that team. Lewis has been there a long time, but also Lewis was the test mule for the setups of the car at the start of the season. Splitting them two, particularly in qualifying pace, I do think Lewis has had the advantage typically in race pace. Given the horrible car underneath them, very impressed with both this season. Well done, Mercedes boys. Ferrari time and another really, really close quali delta. So first 11 races, 0.186 seconds, which, okay, getting towards 0.2, getting a bit large for Carlos's liking. But then last 11, Carlos actually goes ahead, but only by a fraction, 0.014 of a second, 6.5 to Carlos in head-to-heads as well. Super, super, super close. If Ferrari and Mercedes are up there in the fight with Red Bull next year, I feel pretty confident in saying that both drivers for both teams will be extracting top-tier pace in qualifying, which is potentially a problem for Red Bull, which we'll get onto. I'm actually what am I gonna do here? I think, right, the fact that Sainz has closed that gap up and actually gone quicker than Charles in this second half of the season in terms of qualifying, I think he's got to go in rapid because I hold Charles Leclerc in very high esteem, and Charles Leclerc is a quali god. He just is. If he's not a quali god, I don't know who is. And I'm definitely not just putting one person in quali god. There's too many quali gods out here. Which leaves us with Red Bull Racing. As you can see, first 11 races, 8.3 to Max, 0.397 seconds. And that gap grew by almost a tenth. The last 11 nil Max Verstappen. Certainly Max found his feet in this Red Bull relative to Sergio, particularly in the second half of the season. At the start of the year, you had Checo out qualifying Max in Saudi Arabia, Checo out qualifying Max in Monaco. Did he crash on purpose or not? I think he might have, But yeah, this could be a problem for Red Bull. I've said this before, like going into next year, when you've got Carlos and Charles, when you've got George and Lewis so close to each other relative pace wise, all four of them can extract top tier performances from their cars, and it seems that Checo is nowhere near Max. The reality is he isn't. It's almost half a second the average delta in the last 11 races of the year. Obviously Max goes straight into quali god. Checo, I'm going to put him in solid, because also I think part of it is like, I just think Max Verstappen is that good that he would make most vast, overwhelming majority of drivers. He's already done it to Albon, he's already done it to Gasly. Look solid at best, even if they're doing bits. Putting him in mid would be a bit too harsh. So into solid you go, Checo. And that's my tier list done. Down here I'll put the Excel sheet. Feel free to pause it if you want to really look into the details and look at exactly which qualifying sessions I'm taking these deltas from. Now make sure you keep your eyes on the channel, make sure you like this video and subscribe, turn notification bell on so that you don't miss my full season report coming soon, and my reactions to my predictions, all that good stuff. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.